Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. Today, we are with someone very special, someone who I even remember as a child. So today, we're with Malcolm Hoenlein. Malcolm is the CEO Emeritus of Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organization, and he's a leader of American Jewry for 5 decades already. He was involved in Soviet Jewry, the whole Natan Sharansky we had on our program. I'm 100% sure you probably know him and you're close with Natan. And I'm pretty sure we spoke about you off the record when he was there, so he remembers you very fondly. So Malcolm Hoenlein, it's a pleasure to speak with you and meet you in person. It's mamash an honor.
It's my pleasure, and we were both young when we first met, but it's wonderful to be with you.
So Malcolm, we're speaking obviously on the day that the Bibas family is being brought to the funeral, and the whole country is very sad, and obviously it all happened on October 7th. But one thing that my family's in New York, on October 8th, even before Israel was still mourning, we didn't even know the extent of what happened. Already in Times Square, there was protests against pro-Hamas, not just against Israel. People were celebrating in New York, where I grew up, the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Can you maybe just explain to us what American Jewry felt on October 7th and the days after?
So I was here on October 7th for Sukkot with my family, and I was outside as the sirens went off, and an Arab cab driver drove by and grabbed me and pushed me against the wall. And when the sirens ended, he left, but he said to me that thousands are dying in the South. And it was very strange to me how he could have known that already at that time. Yeah. I was on my way to Beit Knesset in the morning. And after the Chag, I got a call from Hadassah Hospital saying there were 3 American lone soldiers there who asked to see me. And I went, of course, to see them. The first 3 I met, I knew their families from Texas, from Toronto, and from New York. One of them, their uncles, was a very close friend of mine. And they kept saying to me, if you don't see it, you can't tell it. When you go back, you have to tell, because nobody will believe what really happened. And I said, I'm not good at that. That's not for me. They don't let civilians down. And even now, it's hard for me to talk about it. But 2 hours later, I was in Sderot.
Mm. And this was on October 7th already, or October 8th, the day after?
But I was in Be'eri when they opened it. I saw everything. I saw the bodies. I saw a terrorist 10 feet away from me. He was giving himself up, but he had a gun. He was looking me right in the face, but a soldier had him. And I kept thinking, how do you tell people this terrible thing? A soldier pushed me aside and said, don't step there. It was a black smudge. He said, a baby was burnt here and we're looking for DNA. And they took me to a chewing gum truck where there were already dozens of bodies by that point inside, keeping it cold. So I couldn't have imagined what the response would be because nobody knew. This was so horrific. And yet there was a revolution that took place in American and I think European Jewry, but particularly in America. A revolution that people still haven't come to full terms with. And I told it to the officials when I came back a month later, in November. I told it to Prime Minister and others. I said there's a revolution and there are October 8th Jews, people who had nothing to do with the Jewish community before, young and old, important, top level, who wouldn't have taken a phone call 2 years ago from me, are now calling us. And they had various messages. Many of them, the young people, had a sense of desire to be part of a community again, that they re-identified with their Jewish roots. Many of them didn't know how to. And they created new entities. We have 150 new organizations that have been created since October 8th. Many of them attempts to, on their level of education and knowledge, to create clubs, to create settings so that they started Friday night events. And they didn't even know how to make a full Shabbat event. It keeps developing in broader numbers. You see the biggest names who stopped giving to the universities in America and turned to give to Jewish causes. A man called me, one of the top families in America, who had nothing to do with the Jewish community before, and he has somebody to set it up for him to speak to me. And then he said to me, look, my daughter was dating a non-Jew until October 7th. And afterwards she said to me, I can't anymore. Where can she meet Jewish guys? That's what he wanted to know. And then the CEOs who called me to tell me, it's in my boardroom. They say things now in front of me. They make anti-Semitic comments with me sitting there. What do I do? How do we handle it? And then many others who are calling to say, what do I do? How do I help? How do I relate? Many of them had not been to Israel. Many of them had actually really no Jewish involvement per se. Maybe went to synagogue twice a year, 3 times a year, or even less. But each on their own level was trying to identify. And so we try to create entities that would channel them into positive responses, and it had to be right away because, with time it dissipates. It has not dissipated like I thought it would. It's still very strong, the feeling, and the growth of the anti-Semitism drives them even further. So young people who experienced it on campus and in communities, and it's not just on campuses, they see the synagogues in their community defaced. They see friends and neighbors, roommates, others who stopped talking to them after October 7th. People don't really appreciate here and elsewhere unless you experience it. But today, the vast majority of people have either experienced it or somebody in their family experienced it or they know somebody. But more than half of American Jews say they've experienced some form of anti-Semitism. The vast majority know of somebody who was a victim. And many of it, there's physical assaults. People don't remember that Jews died. Jews were killed in Pittsburgh. Jews were killed in other places because of it.
In LA, there was a protester, a pro-Israel protester, I think, that was hit in the head and died.
And he was killed, and he died, and there was a prosecution against the guy. You talk about LA, this past week, a young Jewish boy walking on the street was assaulted by a gang of Arabs, was beaten up in full view. It's on the internet. You can see it. The cars were honking, and they didn't do anything to get out of the car to save this boy. I don't know his current condition, but you could see him laying afterwards motionless on the ground. And this is happening in big cities, small cities,
How do you
everywhere.
explain it? I mean, let me maybe make the question a little bit more poignant. So one of the things when I was growing up in New York, I don't think I ever experienced. People would say something, okay, you just walk by and everything's fine. We always thought of anti-Semitism as being like skinheads somewhere in like a small town that no one goes to in Idaho or whatever. Suddenly, it probably was before October 7th, like a little bit under the surface, and if you scratch a little, you find it. But it came out in full force, and not just from the most influential people who are most educated on campuses, professors, and all these people enlightened, I say quote unquote, but people who are like part of the elite. Not these like skinheads that no one takes seriously.
You're asking several important questions. One is, there really was anti-Semitism before.
Yes.
It was more subdued. It wasn't as consistent. And there are a lot of sources. There's the extreme left. Mm-hmm. There's the extreme right, although more, I think, right now from the extreme left. And the infusion of foreign funding.
Qatar.
We'll come to that. That's right. But also coming out of the Muslim communities and out of minority communities that are influenced, and often on the internet plays a role because the messages that they're getting on the internet incite them. The media distorted and really blatantly violative of every rule of journalism. Yes. They're reporting on Israel, and that's what people get their information, but young people especially from TikTok. The internet. And there we saw the influence, let's say, of Qatar, which invested billions of dollars, not millions, billions, on our campuses. Yes. And the NCRI uncovered it and started speaking about it. Members of Congress now investigating, and it's probably much more than the 6 or 7 billion that was identified. It could be double that amount and more. And they took over the university things. The universities caved to them. And even when they caught people on the campuses, they didn't prosecute. I brought 20 students to meet senators from 20 universities, and each one was given 1 minute just to tell what happened to them. And a girl says on a Friday night, they set fire to my dorm door, her dorm door. A boy said, I was put in the hospital 3 days walking home from the Friday night meal at Chabad. And in each instance, the universities did nothing. No prosecution, nothing. only 2 of them offered counseling to the victims. And in most cases, the victims were the ones who were shunned. When incidents took place in the classrooms where professors told Jewish students to stand on side, when they would make blatantly, not just anti-Israel, but also anti-Semitic comments. So you have the infusion, and then we discovered in the K to 12, from kindergarten to 12th grade, also foreign funding, also extremist elements, also teaching kids in the kindergartens, not the wheels on the bus go round and round, the wheels on the tanks go round and round, and it's anti-Israel. There are schools that they took the children out of kindergartens and marched them to a synagogue to demonstrate, to participate in the demonstration. And we found, as a result of this, 1,000 teachers that are Jewish teachers that are saying we can't stay in our schools.
Why?
Because it's so hostile, the environment against Jewish teachers and against anybody who doesn't criticize Israel, and anybody who stands up against the anti-Semitism. We also found thousands of Jewish students in the public schools who want to get out because they find it so hostile. And many times the schools are full now. You see, you take a school like Yeshiva University, it doesn't have an empty seat because parents want a safe environment for their kids. Catholic schools, universities are advertising, we offer a safe place to Jewish students. And they put ads in the paper with this. So you have the internet, you have the incitement, you have the state sponsors, including Iran, including Turkey, and of course, Qatar, but others, Russia, where all these anti-Semitic websites are produced and fed out. And we can close 1,000, they produce 10,000. We close 10,000, they'll produce 100,000. Yeah. And it doesn't take anything. They have bots. We found in one case that 80% of the messages to the White House in one day were from bots. They weren't from people. They were generated.
You mean people who, or messages that were sent to the White House against Israel, like to stop support?
The White House opinion line.
Yeah.
I'm saying how they manipulate the internet with bots, which create the impression of a person sending it, but in fact, it's a machine generating it. And of course, we had an election year. We had other things that added to it. So you had the war, the mobilization against the war that took place, the irrationality of it, not based on information. On every place where we sent people to interview students and saying, what river and what sea? They don't know.
Yes.
When they ask them, tell us the history, are you pro-Palestinian? Yes, you're in favor of destroying the state of Israel. So, no, we didn't say that. They said, yes, you did say that when you're saying river to the sea. Many of them didn't know. Many of them are professionals. Many of them on campus are paid because they get full subsidies from Arab countries, from others. And when you have all the Soros-like sponsorships of organizations, Pink, the SJP, Voices for Peace, who are not Voices for Peace, and they're not Jewish, many of them, even though they hide under the...
There's 2 Jews, and all the other people say, it's like, as a Jew, I can say, and then you have 1 Jew and 1,000 anti-Jewish people and behind him. It's like, yeah.
And the universities' failure to respond and to act until they started paying a price, and until we started the lawsuits, which really got their attention. And you know that right before Trump came into office, all of a sudden the universities start rushing to settle the lawsuits because they knew and they see the consequences. And we went to the Department of Education, and they were well-meaning, but they did nothing. I mean, it was really totally ineffective.
Under Joe Biden, President Biden.
Under President Biden. And they created a national task force on anti-Semitism, and they were supposed to report after a year. Nothing came out of any of it. His executive orders hit right to the point of
President Trump's
executive orders of the thing. We'll see if they pass court tests and other things. But the fact is that they caught the attention of universities. NCRI did a report on DEI. Within 1 week, universities started changing their whole woke culture, dropping it. Amazon did, Walmart did. They were all waiting for a legitimate way to do it. And then once they had documentation, they did it. And then, of course, you have things like TikTok and the studies that came out. And the fact is we have to be absolutely sure of what we're saying. It's the legitimacy of the case we make. It's the effectiveness of our communication. It's the trustworthiness. Because if they disprove things we say, they will never believe us.
Right.
So we have to be careful always to be factual and to be able to communicate not to the haters, but to the middle group.
Yes.
That's our target. And we have to also make sure that we don't lose Democrats, that we don't let Israel become a partisan issue.
Are you worried that that's happening? Because one of the things that in Israel is I would say the people who are opposed to Netanyahu is that he's too Republican. That he's making is like when he goes to speak in Congress, and the president, for example, is not sure if he likes it so much, or if if he's criticizing. He put out a video. Remember when the Biden administration stopped certain weapons from coming, which was disgusting in my opinion. And he put out, they said, oh, you should do it behind the scenes, and you're making it a partisan issue. Are you worried? Is it his fault that it's a partisan issue? How do you see that?
So it's the fault of the extremists in the Democratic Party. It's the AOCs and the
Ilhan Omar's, Rashida Tlaib,
the Squid, and the others that are responsible for that. But and the tolerance of it, the fact that the Democrats didn't let in the Senate the 4 pieces of legislation on anti-Semitism, including, unfortunately, Schumer when he was the leader. They did not. Now he supports it, and he's writing a book on anti-Semitism. So there are problems in the Democratic Party, but we have problems in the Republican Party, too, of extremists who might be from the extreme right or have very radical views. Tucker Carlson, you can go down the Candace Owens, many others who are associated with people in the administration or have relationships. Overall, the appointments are people like Rubio and Waltz and all these guys, and Stefanik, and I'm talking about in the cabinet itself. Ambassadors is one thing. They don't make policy. They can help, but we're also concerned that there are people in second, third levels that are not as supportive, and so we don't take anything for granted. Not on the Republican side, not on the Democratic side. The overwhelming majority of Democrats are pro-Israel in this Congress and out of the Congress. There is a much bigger element that is increasingly hostile. I think that many of those who demonstrate aren't Republicans or Democrats. They're anti-American, probably don't vote. And you saw in Michigan that Trump, despite his pro-Israel orientation, won. Pennsylvania, look at Fetterman, Senator Fetterman, turned out to be the most amazing guy. And he's up 14 points in Pennsylvania. So it's good politics to be pro-Israel for those who want to look at it.
It's good politics to be normal and pro-American, I think, if you're an American politician. And pro-America's friends.
People who are pro-American should be pro-Israel.
Exactly.
Not everybody is. But you also have the courageous, the Gottheimers, the Torreses, the others who and Republicans who speak out. So we have to win everybody. We need everybody's support. Liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, minority groups, everything. There are people we can't win, so it's a mistake to focus and invest in that, but focus on the majority. American people are fundamentally pro-Israel, 2/3, and they more and more identify with Israel, with Israel's struggle and with the fight against Islamic extremism and against the terrorism, which they're all concerned about too. So I think that there is a basis for building the U.S.-Israel understanding, the relationship, expanding it. Certainly both sides recognize the danger posed by Iran. Iran's major enemy is the U.S. Israel's the second enemy. And sometimes you attack Israel because it's easier than attacking the United States. But what Israel did in this past year, I know from Arab leaders that I spoke to, they all had one message: decimate them. Tell Israel, don't listen to what we say, just do it. Decimate them, because this is a cancer that metastasizes. And Egypt will be next, Jordan will be next, the UAE will be next. All of them know that they will be in line if we don't root out this cancer. And each time when Israel left some behind and that they could come back again, they threaten all of these governments as well. And so the Shiite ring of fire has been set a real big setback, and we have to make sure that there isn't a Sunni ring of fire led by Turkey and its extremists in Syria, where they have emerged much more powerful, that in Lebanon they're trying to establish themselves, in Gaza and playing a role. When the Muslim Brotherhood clique, we have to make sure that we don't substitute one dangerous scenario for another. And we have to educate the American people about it, and American leaders. You know, they're focusing on so many issues. The war in Ukraine now has
the border, Ukraine, all these
the domestic issues for sure, and economics always takes first place. But I think there's generally goodwill. I think in the Congress there is, certainly amongst Republicans. It's an overwhelming majority amongst Democrats. I still think we have very significant support. We have to hold on to it. We have to change the way we communicate to become much more relevant. to use the internet, to use all the vehicles that are available, to sharpen the language that comes out of here and that comes out of Israel, as well as what people in the States say.
I want to ask you about, you said Democrat supporters are one of the things, and I agree 100%. We see it in the polls. It's not up for debate. What is very worrisome for me as someone living here, but also following what's happening where you are, is the young people. So whenever they do the Democrats supporting Israel, they'll do it by age groups, and you'll see that 18 to 24-year-olds are much less supportive of Israel than all the other age groups. And those are the people that will be the next leaders of the Democrat Party. And my question to you is, are you as one of the biggest, most important Jewish leaders in the U.S., are you worried about this? Is this something that you're following? You're trying to counter this? What are we doing about this?
Yes, I'm concerned about it. Yes, I follow it. And yes, I'm trying to do stuff about it. I'm working with other people, including some very well-known names, where we're reaching out to that age cohort. I've been involved with all the groups doing the lawsuits and at universities and trying to protect the rights of Jewish students and those who speak up for Israel and put down the hostile elements. And at the same time, trying to create positive venues for people to come. And as I said, the new clubs that are being formed, many of them are instituting programs. And I work with one place in particular, and we were going to have a dinner for influencers and people. In one day, we were completely full. And big names, Hollywood names even came to it. So in that regard, I'm a little optimistic. We have to make the investment in it. We have to do much more creatively. We have to learn to use AI. We have to learn to use all the modern technologies like our enemies do, and expose them.
Yes.
So so I am concerned about it. I think it's been true all along that age cohort always was less supportive than their grandparents, and the chart went like this. It doesn't go quite like that now. It can go like this. But those who remember the creation, those who remember the Shoah, today the Shoah is at best a historical memory. 20% of the people couldn't identify Auschwitz in a worldwide survey. Others, they don't know really the details. And Holocaust denial is a form of anti-Semitism. And now there's October 7th denial.
Yes, and not only that, Malcolm, I have to say, just as a grandson of Holocaust survivors who lost their entire family, it's just very frustrating and annoying, and makes me very angry that they call what Israel's doing a genocide, because genocide was the whole phrase, the concept was out of the Holocaust, and by a Jewish legal scholar, which his name I forgot now, but the point is that it was made because of what was done to the Jews. And they're using the same phraseology that they used on what happened to the Jews to try to say the Jews are doing that now. So it's not only a denial, it's also like a double, it's the worst of the worst to use these kinds of languages. It's so bad. I assume you agree with me, but it makes me very, it's like, it's personal to all Jews.
They adopt the language that, we see the intersectionality,
yes,
that the opposition there, we saw with Black Lives Matter and tying it to the Palestinian cause, and they usurp all of the issues to the Palestinian issue, and sometimes it creates a big backlash because they say you are abusing maybe a legitimate cause to promote their own, but therefore I think that the numbers of real support, while very alarming in some places, they can turn out thousands of people to demonstrate and are increasing the level of violence and get support from faculty, from academics, and from political leaders, from others. It's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just here, and we have to globalize our efforts because we need an early warning system, because often the messages go country by country. So when, let's say, we learn in Holland a new thrust on anti-Semitism, eventually it'll make its way to France, England, and once in England, it comes to the U.S. And I started efforts against BDS when people didn't even know what it was, and they said to me, "You're crazy. What is this BDS? There's no BDS here." Because I saw what was going on in England. And I said, it will follow the model of top-down. It'll start in academia, it'll start amongst the elites, and then work its way down. So 6 months later, BDS came to America, and we at least had a little bit of a head start, though, again, people were skeptical. And BDS paved the way for a lot of what we're seeing today. Once you start boycotting products, you boycott people, you start raising the level of extremism and then violence, because words of violence lead to deeds of violence inevitably. And so we have to be very careful. And wherever we see it, we got to stomp it out. We've got to oppose it. We've got to be training our people, young people, how to protect themselves, how to protect our institutions. We have largely expanded the Jewish security infrastructure in America, like it exists in many places in Europe.
Does that cost money? I mean, like, for example, right. So, for example, already a lot of Jews in America are complaining and they might not be able to afford Jewish education. It's very expensive. It's not like in some even European countries where the government can give money to Jewish schools. It's different in America because I think of the separation of church and state.
For security, the government does give grants.
It does help. Okay.
And they give hundreds of millions of dollars, which a lot of it goes to synagogues because we are the major target.
Yes.
You know, they talk about Islamophobia, but the fact is that 60% or more are anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic events really are usually less than 10%. And I don't want it to be more. I don't want any group to be targeted, but you have anti-Asian discrimination, and often in parallel with anti-Semitism, like on campuses. You know, we have quotas on American campuses now, and in Harvard, Yale, Stanford, across the country, Michigan, we see it. I just was shown a study of medical schools, and many of them in 3 years have not admitted a Jewish student.
And you think it's on purpose that
100%,
they don't want Jews?
100%.
Why? They're anti-Semites.
First of all,
faculty.
The idea of diversity, and it's this false woke culture. The Jews were one of the victims. Asian Americans were a victim because they also are high achievers, whatever. And I will tell you that most in the black community don't want this.
Yes.
Because they say that our achievements are always ascribed to affirmative action, not because we worked hard and we got where we got to. Mm-hmm. And you see the backlash of minority communities against it, because it ultimately plays against Hindus, for instance.
Yes.
Also subject of discriminatory practices, and universities targeting these higher achieving groups. And not because they're smart or stuff, because that there's traditions and their culture, and the numbers, thank God, of minorities is increasing. We want to see it, all of it. Every student should have an equal opportunity. We're not asking for favored treatment. We're asking for what we're entitled to, which is security first and foremost. That Jewish students and Jewish faculty shouldn't have to worry when they go on a campus in the morning, and that means not walking on the street. That means not walking on the campus. That means not being able to go into a classroom. Every one of those places have to be safe places.
Yes.
And we cannot let people get away with it. If a DA doesn't prosecute, we have to shine the light of day on them and embarrass them and hold them to account.
There are DAs, district attorneys for people in Israel. It's like the lawyers of the certain area that are in charge of enforcing the law, basically, and prosecuting criminals. There are DAs that in America in certain areas that won't prosecute institutions or people that you've seen over the last, since October 7th, that are more hesitant of prosecuting people who have been doing a number of things against Jews, different cases?
Absolutely.
Why? What is their reasoning when you ask them as an organization?
First of all, the culture was not to expend resources on it. Number two, many of them came from the left. It's not because they support anti-Semitism. It's that they weren't willing to fight it.
Yeah.
And it was true to universities, presidents. You saw the testimony they gave. They didn't express anti-Semitic, but they weren't willing to condemn it. They weren't willing to say
depends on the context.
That an right, exactly, the context, but weren't willing to say that this violates your standards. But if you would have said to them, would discrimination against a black, Hispanic, anybody else, they would have said, of course, it's a violation of our standards. And increasingly, they've become hostile environments. And in that environment, people who are frustrated, people who are unhappy with their own achievements or whatever, they look for a scapegoat. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, we have been that.
Yes.
But this has been true throughout all of time. And we look at the lessons from Paro. What did he say? Did the Jews do anything wrong? No. He said, Chavas and Yitzchak Malo, we have to deal shrewdly with them. Not, it said perhaps they will grow strong, perhaps they will join with the enemy. Not because they did, and they didn't. They were loyal citizens. They built up Goshen for them. But it happens in every generation, and we have to learn the lessons of the past to be able to prevent future generations from having to suffer the same consequences. Those who thought the period of the Shoah was over got a rude awakening on October 8th. Many people who thought that they could assimilate into societies. I can't tell you how many people told me of incidents in social clubs, in offices, in every setting one can imagine, sports events and sports teams, where all of a sudden, the venom was evident, and very few people were willing to stand up for them.
And that's the problem, by the way, that most Americans, like you said before, support Israel, support the Jewish community. But a lot of people are hesitant of standing up. They don't want to be called. They don't want to be controversial. They don't want to get into an argument. They don't want to. So they just let it go by. And a lot of.
They agree with it.
Well, yeah, but we said most don't. So most Americans are not anti-Semites. I think we both agree that most Americans also support Israel. Right. But there are a lot of times.
Yeah, but you see anti-Semites who have 30 million followers, Owens, what's the name?
Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson.
A lot of these guys who what was his name, who was sued, and they have 10, 20, 30 million followers, 40 million followers. So some of them do out of curiosity, some of them do it just because they collect everybody on their site. But on the other hand, they don't cut them off when they see that they say these terrible things.
Yes.
And, hitting them in the pocketbook is probably the best way to stop, because some of them are not curable. Many of them are. They could be educable. Tucker Carlson doesn't want to hear the information. He doesn't want to be educated. And then when you have people who will single out for support the most radical people, and people who will pledge to release people. Cops were telling us that they didn't finish the paperwork when guys who had attacked 3 synagogues in the morning were back out in the community.
Why? Because someone was vouching for them, giving money for
they get a desk appearance and told to leave. And they go before a judge, or they just file the papers and they tell them, come back in 6 months. You think they're going to show up?
Then they could do again another attack.
But they don't show up, and especially if it's an illegal or somebody else that doesn't have any roots and can move on. So it is a very complicated issue, and we can't simplify it and talk about it in simplistic terms or generalistic terms. You don't condemn whole groups. You look at the sources. I think if we can cut off the funding, if we can show foreign governments that they can't continue to undermine American society, because again, this is a war against America. Israel's the small Satan. America is the big target, the big Satan. And to use our resources to really prosecute and get rid of the people who, and the point about deporting those foreign students, for instance, who are engaged in almost full-time hate mongering and propagating the stuff they do against Israel and supporting terrorist entities, they should be.
Yeah. Malcolm, I want to ask you, just as like the next part of the last part of our conversation, about your history, meaning not you specifically, but you, which is also good. But one of the things that you have been a supporter and follower and a leader of the Jewish people and of the State of Israel for many years now. And I asked, can you tell us about the prime ministers that you've met? Who was the first prime minister that you met of Israel? Golda, maybe? I was just thinking about it on the way here.
I actually did the first dedication and built a memorial to Golda in the middle of Broadway on 34th and Broadway, New York City. And Golda's sister came to it. I don't think I met Golda.
So Begin was the first one you met?
I knew Begin extremely well. And Shamir and everybody from them on. I had very close relationships with almost all of them, or with them. Even where we disagreed, they understood that, I knew that our job wasn't to be the government of Israel. I respected the responsibilities that they had at it. And I remember talking to Rabin about it, and one time it brought him to tears when he was talking about what the responsibility of being a prime minister of Israel is, when you have to walk out and see the families of people who fell because you sent their sons into battle, because of what you did. And And we recognized, and I always operated on the principle that we living in America don't make the policy for Israel. We can express our views, we can make constructive comments. I do it all the time. I earned the trust of almost all the prime ministers. I know many intimate things. I never leak, and they all say that. The same thing with American presidents. I worked with every president since Carter, and Carter used to call me at home and talk to me, even though he knew we disagreed on many things.
Very much so.
But I was able to get things done because of it. And the same thing with Arab leaders. I met with Assad. I met with the leaders of UAE, MBZ and MBS. I've traveled. I started working in the Gulf in the 1990s, long before anybody else did. I arranged the first visit of Peres, Shimon Peres, and the opening of the interest section in Qatar.
Wow.
When they put red carpets on the street when we came. Because I really believed that Israel had to find a place in the region. We created the Mediterranean Initiative with Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, visiting there with Greek American leaders every 2 years to visit the heads of all three, until we got them talking. And look how that's burgeoned. And now many other countries want to be part of it. I worked on the Abraham Spirit, which is dealing in Central Asia, and of course the Abraham Accords. So, working with leaders, you have to understand, you have to earn their trust, and that depends on whether they find you an honest interlocutor. They test to see, and especially Arab leaders test to see if you really know what you're talking about. And I never leaked.
That's the number one thing they're worried about.
And many of them say to me, and I'm telling you, they talk to me about personal things. They talk to me about many things because they know I believe what was important is not getting an instant headline. Sure, you get a kick from your name being a headline. I could have made headlines almost every week.
Yeah.
But it was more important to me was the long-term objective. And I think today too many people looked at it as short-term. So I worked with presidents, Republicans, and Democrats. I think that there were many false accusations against some, and others that people didn't understand. Some of the people who worked for them were really troubling. And I had encounters, including confrontations, with many of them over the years. And one of the things that I wore a yarmulke all the time, that was Jewish pride, that we stood our ground when we were right. If we were wrong, we acknowledged it. If there was another side to be heard, that we try to evaluate it. You do this intelligently. You have to realize that Jewish power is sacred. It's something Jews in the past didn't have, that they always lived at the sufferance of others. And for the first time, we really had a say in our own fate. But it's also like a muscle. If you exercise it right, you build it up. If you abuse it, you destroy it. And too often, people think Jewish power is a headline. It is not. Often, it's not being in the headlines. That's why I didn't have PR people for most of my career and stuff, because I think you should be known by what you do, not what you say you do. And ultimately, people know. They know who they can trust. They know what they can do, and they tell each other. And people, are the best way to be vouched for. Your headline doesn't vouch for you. It may say that you did something important, and we did Soviet Jewry, we did saving Syrian Jews and Ethiopian Jews and Iranian Jews and Iraqi Jews, and I negotiated with the Iranian regime to get the Iran 13 out. I had dinner in Zarif's home twice. No, I couldn't eat anything, and I've met some of the worst dictators. I have a long-standing relation with Putin and with many others. And I found that, you can always find some area. And some of the worst guys when it came to Israel were some of the most helpful on Jewish security issues, on an endangered Jewish community.
Yeah.
And when you establish a relationship of trust, and they see you're not in it for you, you're really, that people, and there's a lesson for leadership all the time. And I try to talk to young people about how you relate, how you build credibility. I had a sign in my office that said, "There's no limit to what a person can do if you don't care who gets credit." And it was there because the first Orthodox congressman, Herb Tenzer, famous lawyer in New York from the Five Towns, he once asked me what my favorite saying was, and I told him that. And he reached behind his desk and he pulled out a yahrzeit plaque, one of the things they put up in synagogues as memorial plaques, that he made up for all the members of Congress that said that. And he said, this is the last one I have, and I want you to have it. And I put it in my office for more than 50 years. It turned out Ronald Reagan carried that in his wallet his whole life. And so have others who, in different formulations, because if you're so focused on you getting credit, rather than seeing how you get it done, because if you get it done, then you get the credit.
Right.
Anyway, there's enough to go around for everybody.
I wish more people had that kind of outlook, especially in Israeli politics, but it's for a different day. Malcolm, one last short question. You mentioned that you met Mohammed MBZ and all these other Arab world leaders. Do you think that the Abraham Accords there's rumors, there's things behind the scenes, Gaza, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. Are we going to see in the next near future the more Arab countries joining the Abraham Accords?
So first of all, I'm optimistic about the Abraham Accords. If we do it right, I think we should take the focus off Saudi Arabia. We should continue with them, but this demand in making that, the sine qua non for the future of the Abraham Accords. I think there are many other Muslim countries. I know there are because I've met the presidents of these countries. There are a lot that people would be very surprised. I think the mistake is going just for diplomatic relations. I think for those that don't have it, many of the countries have it already. But if they don't, first establish things on the ground. All the things that Israel has to offer, do joint economic projects, tourism, do things in post-harvest reclamation, water desalination, other things where Israel has so much to offer them. And when they see that, diplomatic relations will flow. Otherwise, you spend 2 years negotiating a piece of paper, doesn't mean anything. And I think the same thing with Saudi Arabia. There is a lot going on, much more than people know there and in UAE, and despite all of the difficulties and how many businessmen come, maybe Pakistan, Indonesians, others, come to Israel. People want it. There's a lot of opposition to it. But when they see the benefit, then that will pave the way. And I can tell you, countries in Asia, distant countries, have been in touch with me saying, we know what we've read about your plan and stuff, and President Biden endorsed it completely, but they didn't do anything. We could have been much further ahead. I hope we will be much further ahead. I think that there are opportunities to build a solid bloc from Morocco to the Quad, to Australia, South Korea, Japan, that will counter the extremist influences, that will be a buffer for Russia, that will counter the Belt and Road, that will encircle Iran without a bullet being fired.
So, Malcolm Hoenlein, finishing off with that optimism, I have to say that it was a true honor to speak with you. You are truly, I want to speak with people that aren't Jewish, say, a good friend of the Jewish people. But you're Jewish, so you're a good friend of Israel.
And I'm a good friend of the non-Jewish people.
And of the non-Jewish people that are good friends with the Jewish people. So, and we are friends with you. So thank you so much for being with us. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And if you have any questions that you would want that I should ask Malcolm after to, try to complete things that maybe you wanted to know, hand them to me. WhatsApp, Facebook, X, all the other platforms, send them, and the good ones I'll give to Malcolm, and we'll see if he wants to answer. It's up to you. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on our next episode.